Alara Van sighed as she cataloged yet another fragment of pottery, her eyes strained from hours of peering through the magnifying apparatus. The small lab nestled within the outpost on Planet X-7 was stuffy despite the climate controls, and the monotony of her work was beginning to feel suffocating. As a junior archaeologist for Galactic Heritage Corporation, she had hoped for adventure and discovery. Instead, she got paperwork and pottery shards. Item X7-3291, ceramic fragment. Estimated age 3,200 standard years, likely decorative or utilitarian in purpose, she murmured into her recorder. Composition consistent with local clay deposits. No significant markings or technological features. She placed the fragment in its designated storage unit and reached for the next item in the seemingly endless pile. From across the lab, her supervisor Zorp made a clicking sound with his mandibles, the equivalent of clearing one's throat. The six-limbed insectoid was obsessed with protocols and seemed to take personal offense at any deviation from company procedures. Progress report, Junior Archaeologist Vance. Zorp chittered, two of his appendages rapidly inputting data, while another held a cup of something that smelled vaguely of fermented fruit. We are behind schedule by approximately 14 minutes and 37 seconds. I'm working as fast as I can, Supervisor, Alara replied, trying to keep the frustration from her voice. Some of these artifacts require closer examination. Examination, yes. Dawdling, no. Zorp's compound eyes glittered under the harsh laboratory lights. This outpost represents a significant corporate investment. We must catalog and classify all findings efficiently to justify continued funding. Alara nodded absently, already reaching for the next container. She didn't bother reminding Zorp that X-7 was considered a low-priority acquisition, a footnote in Galactic Heritage's vast portfolio of archaeological sites. The corporation had only purchased rights to the planet because it came bundled with two more promising locations in the same star system. As she opened the container, something immediately felt different. Instead of the usual fragments of pottery or fossilized plant matter, she found herself staring at a perfectly smooth metallic sphere approximately the size of her palm. The surface gleamed despite the millennia it had presumably spent buried in the soil of X-7. Interesting, she whispered, picking it up carefully. The object was unexpectedly lightweight, and it seemed to hum ever so slightly against her skin, though she attributed that to her own exhaustion playing tricks on her senses. Alara ran it through the standard scanner, but the results were puzzling. Unusual alloy composition, unknown origin, no obvious method of manufacture. She frowned at the readout. Age estimation, inconclusive. Zorp scuttled over, antenna twitching in irritation. Another anomaly? Just classify it as decorative/purpose undetermined and move on. We have 273 more items to catalog before the day cycle ends. But don't you think this warrants further study? Alara turned the sphere in her hands. It doesn't match anything we've found on X-7 so far. The civilization here was primitive, mostly stone tools and basic pottery. Nothing like this level of metallurgy. If you wish to conduct an unauthorized research project, do so on your personal time, Zorp replied dismissively. For now, catalog and continue. Reluctantly, Alara set the sphere aside, but throughout the remainder of her shift, she found her eyes drawn back to it repeatedly. Something about it called to her in a way she couldn't explain. As the outpost's lighting dimmed to simulate evening, she noticed something peculiar. The sphere seemed to pulse almost imperceptibly, catching the light at odd angles. And each time she approached it, the lights in the lab flickered slightly, and her communicator emitted brief bursts of static. That night, after Zorp had retreated to his quarters, Alara returned to the lab. She'd been unable to sleep, her mind filled with thoughts of the strange object. She pulled up what little historical data existed on X-7, a primitive civilization that had existed briefly, perhaps for just a few thousand years, before vanishing without explanation. No records indicated any technological sophistication that could explain an object like the sphere. Using her personal access codes and bypassing several company filters, Alara conducted a more thorough scan of the object. The results were bizarre. Complex energy signatures emanated from within the alloy, patterns that almost resembled biological rhythms. "That's impossible," she whispered to herself, running the scan again with the same results. The following day, as the cataloging process neared completion, Alara prepared the sphere for final processing before shipment to the company's main research facility. As she carefully cleaned its surface one last time, her cloth snagged on what felt like an indentation, something she hadn't noticed before. Adjusting the light, she could just barely make out a small, subtle pattern etched into the otherwise perfect surface. Curious, she traced the pattern with her fingertip, and the world around her changed in an instant. The sphere hummed to life, rising from her palm to hover in midair. Its surface began to glow with an internal light, and intricate patterns, similar to the one she'd touched, appeared across its entirety, shifting and flowing like liquid. The lab's lights flickered violently, and Alara felt the artificial gravity fluctuate, causing her stomach to lurch. "What have you done?" Zorp shrieked from across the room, his exoskeleton vibrating with alarm. "Shut it down immediately." "I don't know how," Alara called back, reaching for the sphere instinctively, then pulling back as a wave of energy pulsed outward from it. The pulse hit the lab's systems like an electromagnetic surge. Door panels slid open and closed randomly. The environmental controls went haywire. The temperature plummeted so rapidly that moisture in the air crystallized, creating a brief, localized snowfall inside the lab. Communication systems emitted an ear-splitting screech of feedback before falling silent. "This is a direct violation of protocol." Zorp's voice had risen several octaves, his limbs flailing as he attempted to access emergency systems that were no longer responding. "You will be terminated from your position and possibly prosecuted for damages to company property." Alara barely heard him. Before her eyes, or perhaps directly within her mind, the sphere had projected a complex, three-dimensional interface. Symbols and structures she couldn't comprehend flowed around her, yet somehow felt familiar, as if part of her recognized them on a level deeper than conscious thought. A voice that wasn't quite a voice communicated directly into her awareness. Asterisk, "I am the seed key. You bear the pattern." Asterisk. "What pattern?" Alara whispered, aware that Zorp couldn't see what she was seeing. Asterisk, "The genetic marker of the custodians. Dormant but present. You are descended from those chosen to watch." Asterisk. Images flooded into her mind. A vast network of similar spheres scattered across the galaxy, each containing or controlling something vital. This planet, not merely abandoned, but deliberately sealed by the creators of the key. A quarantine, a safeguard. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Asterisk, "Activation protocols initiated. Network compromised. Defenses awakening." Asterisk. As if on cue, a distant rumbling shook the outpost. Through the lab's viewport, Alara saw ancient structures rising from the soil in the distance. Structures that scans had never detected because they had been dormant, shielded somehow. Zorp had managed to access an emergency communicator. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Supervisor Zorp at X-7 Outpost. We have a Category Alpha situation. Unknown technology activation. Request immediate." His transmission cut off as all power to the communications array failed completely. The lab's external sensors managed one last reading before they too went offline. Multiple energy signatures activating across the planet's surface, and a larger signature approaching rapidly from orbit. "What's happening?" Alara demanded of the interface. Asterisk, "Planetary defense systems activating in response to the seed key. External entities detecting energy signature. The seal is broken. Containment protocols failing." Asterisk. A violent shudder ran through the outpost as something struck nearby. Alarms would have sounded if they were still functional. Instead, there was only an eerie silence broken by the creak of the structure's framework under stress. "We need to leave," Alara said, turning to Zorp, who who was frantically trying to restart the lab systems. Now, this is your doing, the insectoid hissed. Fix it. There's no fixing this, she replied, grabbing an emergency pack from beneath her workstation. Something was buried on this planet, sealed away, and we woke it up, and now something else is coming. We need to go. As if to emphasize her point, a section of ceiling collapsed at the far end of the lab, exposing the sky above. Through the gap, Alara spotted a metallic object hovering. Not a ship, but a drone of some kind, its design unlike anything in current use. Ancient tech, awakened along with whatever else had been sleeping beneath the surface of X7. The drone emitted a piercing beam of light that swept across the lab, settling on the sphere, still hovering near Alara. A targeting beam. Acting on instinct, Alara grabbed the sphere. To her surprise, it didn't resist but seemed to meld partially with her hand, its surface remaining solid but somehow connected to her. The interface in her mind shifted, control inputs appearing. Asterisk defensive capabilities available. Limited. Untrained user. Caution advised. Asterisk. How do I stop that thing from shooting us? Alara asked urgently. A pattern lit up in her mind, and without quite understanding how, she focused on it. Energy flowed from the sphere, creating a translucent barrier between them and the drone just as it fired. The energy blast deflected, tearing through another section of the lab. What are you doing? Zorp demanded, having witnessed the shield. Saving our lives, Alara replied, already moving toward the exit. Follow me if you want to live. The drone fired again, and again Alara projected the shield, though the effort sent pain shooting through her temples. This wasn't a natural interface for humans. Using it was like forcing her brain to execute complex calculations it wasn't designed for. They made it to the corridor, Zorp following reluctantly, his survival instinct overriding his devotion to protocol. The outpost, which had seemed so boring and routine just hours ago, had become a labyrinth of danger. Dormant security systems from the ancient civilization had awakened, sealing some pathways and opening others. Periodically, the gravity would fluctuate or local atmospheric conditions would change abruptly. The main hangar, Alara said, trying to recall the outpost's layout. If we can reach the transport shuttle. Unlikely, Zorp interrupted, his analytical mind still functioning despite his panic. Based on external readings before communications failed, multiple hostiles have landed near the hangar bay. Corporate security or pirates, impossible to determine. Then we need another way off this rock, Alara muttered, consulting the mental map provided by the seed key. There's something. Underground passages. The ancients built them for emergencies. And how exactly do you know this? Zorp demanded suspiciously. Alara tapped the sphere, now seemingly attached to her wrist like a bizarre bracelet. It's showing me. They rounded a corner and came face to face with another drone, this one shaped like a metallic insect with glowing sensor arrays where eyes would be. Before it could react, Alara raised her hand instinctively, and a pulse of energy shot from the sphere, striking the drone. Instead of destroying it, however, the pulse caused the machine to vibrate intensely and then fall to the floor, temporarily disabled. Impressive, came a voice from behind them. Alara spun around to find herself staring at the business end of an energy pistol held by a tall, weather-beaten human man with a jagged scar running along his jawline. He wore the mismatched clothing typical of freelance pilots and smugglers, and despite the weapon pointed at them, his expression was more curious than threatening. Interesting toy you've got there, he nodded toward the sphere at her wrist. Mind telling me what it is that's got half the sector scrambling to this backwater planet? Who are you? Alara demanded, trying to recall the defensive pattern she'd used earlier. Kale, he replied simply. Captain of the Wayward Sun. Or, I was, until those ancient defense drones shot my ship down about an hour ago. He lowered his weapon slightly. Your turn. Alara Vance, junior archaeologist with galactic heritage. This is Supervisor Zorp. She paused, then decided honesty might be their best chance. And this is apparently a seed key, part of some ancient network. It activated accidentally, and now the planet's defenses are online, along with who knows what else. Kale whistled low. That explains the energy surge that fried my ship's navigation system. He holstered his weapon, and the corporate retrieval team that landed right after. They're sweeping the outpost systematically, and they're not being gentle with the staff they've found. Retrieval team? Our company sent a retrieval team. Zorp's mandibles clicked rapidly in distress. Not for you, Kale said bluntly. For whatever that thing is. He nodded toward the sphere. They were talking about an architect artifact over comms, offering big rewards for whoever secures it. Architects, Alara murmured, the word triggering a cascade of information from the seed keys interface. That's what they called themselves. The ones who built this network. A distant explosion rocked the outpost, causing dust to rain down from the ceiling. Fascinating as this is, Kale said, I suggest we continue this conversation somewhere less likely to collapse on our heads. You mentioned underground passages. Alara nodded, still processing the seed keys information. This way, as they moved through the increasingly unstable structure, they encountered more signs of the awakening defenses. Walls that rippled with energy, floors that became temporarily intangible, ancient technologies reactivating after millennia of dormancy. Each time a defense mechanism threatened them, Alara found herself instinctively using the seed key, though each use drained her and occasionally produced unexpected side effects. After one particularly taxing encounter with a security field, Zorp turned briefly translucent, his internal organs visible through his exoskeleton. He emitted a high-pitched squeal of terror before reverting to normal. Sorry, Alara gasped, feeling the strain of controlling powers she barely understood. I'm still figuring this out. Perhaps, Zorp said shakily, you could figure it out without using me as an experimental subject. They had almost reached the access point to the underground passages when they encountered another human. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair, pulled back in a severe bun, wearing the outfit of a field researcher with multiple pockets filled with scientific equipment. Stop right there, she called, holding what appeared to be a scanning device rather than a weapon. That object you're carrying, it's emitting fluctuating tachyon waves consistent with architect technology. Let me guess, Kale said, hand moving toward his holstered pistol. Another corporate vulture here to claim the prize? The woman scoffed. Hardly. I'm Dr. Eris Thorne, xenoarchaeologist. I've been studying this planet's anomalies independently for months. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at Alara, and it seems I was right about what was hidden here. You knew about the seed key? Alara asked. Not specifically, no, but I recognized patterns in the planet's electromagnetic field that matched theoretical architect signatures. She stepped closer, her scanner whirring. I was ostracized from the academic community for my theories about the architects and their technology network. They called it pseudoscience. A grim smile crossed her face. I imagine they'll be revising that opinion shortly. Another explosion, closer this time, made the decision for them. Kale grabbed Dr. Thorne's scanner arm and pulled it down. We can compare research notes later. Right now, we need to get underground before we're either captured or killed. Dr. Thorne hesitated, then nodded. My research facility is hidden 2 kilometers from here, in the caves beneath the northern ridge. If we can reach it, I have equipment that might help us understand that device better. With the seed key's guidance, Alara led them to a service corridor that the outpost builders had unknowingly constructed directly above an ancient passage. Using the sphere's energy, she unlocked a mechanism invisible to normal detection, revealing a sliding panel in the floor. The passage below was eerily smooth, its walls carved from the bedrock with precision impossible for primitive tools. As they descended, lights activated ahead of them, responding to the seed key's presence. These are actual architect passages, Dr. Thorne whispered, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her caution. Do you realize what this means? They had a significant presence on this planet, not just an outpost as most theories suggested. Less history, more moving, Kale suggested, taking point with his energy pistol drawn. We've got company upstairs, and they'll find this entrance soon enough. They moved swiftly through the passages, which occasionally opened into larger chambers filled with dormant machinery of unknown purpose. In one such chamber, Dr. Thorne paused to examine markings on a central column. "These glyphs," she said excitedly, "they match fragments I've documented on 3 other worlds. It's a consistent language system, just as I theorized." Alara felt the seed key pulse at her wrist. In her mind, the symbols briefly made sense. Something about containment and dormancy cycles before fading back to incomprehensibility. "It's talking about something being contained here," she said quietly. Dr. Thorne looked at her sharply. "You can read it?" "Not exactly. The key translates sometimes, in flashes." Alara frowned. Whatever the architects sealed away here, it was dangerous enough that they created an entire defense network to keep it dormant. Kale, who had been checking the next passage, rejoined them with a grim expression. "And now that defense network is shooting at anything that moves on the surface, including my ship." He fixed Alara with an intense stare. "Can you shut it down?" Before she could answer, a distant rumbling echoed through the passages, followed by the sound of falling debris. "They're blasting their way in," Kale said. "We need to move. Now." They pressed on through the labyrinthine passages, guided by Dr. Thorne's familiarity with the local cave systems and Alara's increasingly intuitive connection to the seed key. Zorp remained uncharacteristically quiet, his analytical mind seemingly overwhelmed by the rapid deviation from established protocols. After what felt like hours of navigating through the underground network, they emerged into a larger natural cavern that Dr. Thorne had converted into a makeshift research base. Portable lighting units illuminated cluttered workstations filled with scanning equipment, geological samples, and walls covered with notes and diagrams. "Not exactly corporate luxury," Kale commented, surveying the sparse living quarters adjoining the work area. "Science doesn't require luxury," Dr. Thorne replied, already activating her primary computer system. "It requires data and patience." Alara slumped onto a nearby stool, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. Using the seed key had drained her in ways she didn't fully understand. The sphere itself had partially detached from her wrist and now hovered nearby, its glow pulsating at a steady rhythm. "You need to eat," Dr. Thorne said, not unkindly, pushing a protein bar toward Alara. "That device is drawing energy from you to supplement its own power supply." A fascinating symbiotic relationship, but potentially dangerous for the human host. Host? Zorp's antennae twitched nervously. Is junior archaeologist Vance infected by this technology? Not infected, Dr. Thorne corrected. Selected, I would guess. Architect technology was always theorized to be semi-sentient and selective about its users. She looked at Alara with scientific interest. "The question is, why you?" Alara took a bite of the protein bar, finding she was ravenous. "It said something about me having a genetic marker. Called me a descendant of custodians." Dr. Thorne's eyes widened. "The caretaker theory," she breathed. "It's actually true. Want to share with the class?" Kale asked, returning from a perimeter check of the cavern. "An obscure xenoanthropological theory," Dr. Thorne explained, excitement evident in her voice. "It suggests that the architects didn't simply disappear. They selected specific bloodlines from various species to serve as caretakers for their technology. These individuals would have dormant genetic markers that could be activated when needed." She looked at Alara with new respect. "It seems you're living proof." "Lucky me," Alara muttered, though part of her, the part that had always felt disconnected from her mundane work, as if waiting for something more significant, felt a strange resonance with the idea. "We need to determine our next move," Kale said practically. "That corporate retrieval team won't stop searching, and if they have planetary scanners, they'll eventually detect this hideout." "We have 3 options," Zorp stated, apparently having recovered his analytical faculties. 1. Surrender the artifact to the corporation and face potential disciplinary action, but likely avoid criminal charges. 2. Attempt to neutralize the artifact, thereby ending its effects on planetary systems. 3. Flee the planet with the artifact, becoming fugitives from both corporate justice and possibly interstellar authorities. "You're forgetting option 4, Dr. Thorne said grimly. "Understand what's actually happening here, and why this planet was sealed in the first place." The seed key pulsed brighter, and Alara felt a sudden urgency from it. "It wants to show us something," she said, extending her hand. The sphere floated back to her, reconnecting with her wrist. The interface bloomed in her mind again, but this time it expanded to create a holographic projection visible to everyone in the cavern. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, with pulsing points of light scattered throughout, hundreds of them. "The network," Dr. Thorne whispered. "Each light must represent a seed key." "Correct," Alara said, but the voice didn't feel entirely her own. The seed key was speaking through her, using her understanding of language to communicate. "This is the Architect Network, established 42,000 of your years ago. Each seed key serves as a nexus for monitoring, terraforming, defense, and in cases of emergency, containment." "Containment of what?" Kale asked warily. The galactic map zoomed in on their current location. A dark shadow appeared beneath the planet's surface, pulsing with an ominous energy signature completely different from the seed keys. "The enemy, Alara/seed key," continued. "A parasitic techno-organic entity encountered during early interstellar exploration. It consumes technological systems and organic neural networks alike, growing and evolving with each assimilation. This planet contains a dormant fragment, sealed after an ancient battle. And we just woke it up," Kale said flatly. "Negative. The containment remains intact, but the defense systems activated due to the seed key's awakening are drawing power from the same sources that maintain the containment field. If the defenses remain active for too long, containment will fail." The implications hung heavily in the air. Zorp was the first to break the silence. "Then the logical course of action is to deactivate the seed key immediately, allowing the defense systems to power down and containment to stabilize." The hologram shifted, showing energy patterns flowing between the seed key and the planetary systems. "Deactivation is no longer possible," Alara/seed key stated. "Once awakened, a seed key must either be connected to the larger network for proper functioning or physically transported to a designated safe repository. Attempts to deactivate will trigger a catastrophic energy release." In other words, Kale translated, "We can't turn it off, and we can't leave it here." "The activation sequence has already sent ripples through the dormant network," the voice continued. "Other keys will be responding, and others will be hunting. Others," Dr. Thorne pressed. "You mean more than just the corporate retrieval team?" The hologram showed shadowy ships moving between stars, tracking energy signatures. "The knowledge of the architect has been sought by many throughout the ages. Some seek it for power, others for protection. Some worship what they do not understand." The connection suddenly broke, leaving Alara gasping and disoriented. The seed key detached from her wrist, its glow dimming slightly as it hovered nearby. "That was intense," she managed, rubbing her temples where a headache was forming. "But informative," Dr. Thorne said, already typing notes frantically into her system. "This confirms so many of my theories about the architects and adds entirely new dimensions I never considered." "It doesn't solve our immediate problem," Kale pointed out. "We're still trapped on a planet with awakening defense systems, corporate hunters, and apparently a dormant techno-organic nightmare that might wake up if we don't do something soon." Alara stood up, steadying herself against a workbench. "We need to get off planet. The seed key needs to connect to the broader network or reach some kind of repository. Maybe then the defenses will power down normally." "My ship is damaged beyond quick repair," Kale said, "and the corporate vessels will be guarding the outpost shuttles." Dr. Thorne looked thoughtful. "There might be another way. If the underground passages are architect constructions, they might lead to more than just monitoring stations. Many of my colleagues theorize that the architects used fixed interstellar transit points rather than conventional spacecraft. A teleportation network?" Zorp sounded scandalized by the very concept, which violated several known laws of physics. More like fixed wormhole apertures, Dr. Thorne corrected. Theoretically possible with enough energy and the right space-time manipulation technology, which the architects apparently had. Elara finished. She turned to the hovering seed key. Is she right? Is there a transit point on this planet? The seed key pulsed once, projecting a simple map into Elara's mind, a route through the deeper passages leading to what appeared to be a circular chamber. Yes, she confirmed. Deeper in the cave system. But it's dormant, like everything else was before the key awakened. Can be activated? Kale asked. With a key, yes. But Elara hesitated. It needs coordinates. A destination. Dr. Thorne moved to one of her cluttered workstations and retrieved a small data crystal. These are the coordinates for a planet in the Vale Nebula cluster where I documented extensive architect ruins 3 years ago. If there's a network, there should be a receiving point there. The corporation will follow, Zor pointed out, and potentially other interested parties if what the key showed us is accurate. Then we'll keep moving, Kale said with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to staying one step ahead of pursuers. Find more keys, understand what's happening, figure out what to do next. You're coming with us? Elara asked, surprised. What? Kale shrugged. My ship's destroyed. This planet's becoming increasingly hostile, and quite frankly, the potential payoff for helping you seems better than the alternative. I've always had good instincts for profitable ventures. And you? Elara turned to Dr. Thorne. The older woman smiled wryly. I've spent my career being ridiculed for my theories about the architects. Now I have living proof and a direct connection to their technology. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. All eyes turned to Zorp, who had been unusually quiet. The insectoid's compound eyes reflected the dim light of the cavern as he seemed to be engaged in some internal calculation. The corporation will label me a collaborator regardless of my actual involvement, he finally said. And protocol offers no guidance for situations involving ancient alien networks and potential galaxy-wide threats. Therefore, I will accompany you, if only to document proceedings properly for eventual review. A distant rumbling reminded them of the urgency of their situation. The corporate retrieval team was getting closer. They gathered what supplies they could carry. Dr. Thorne's research equipment, Kale's weapons and survival gear, emergency rations from Zorp's always prepared pack. The seed key led them deeper into the cave system, illuminating the path ahead with its soft glow. Ancient passages gave way to even older constructions, the rock walls gradually transitioning to the same smooth, unknown material that had lined the first architect corridor. Finally, they emerged into a vast circular chamber with a platform in its center. The platform was ringed with what looked like control stations, all dark and dormant. In the chamber's center stood a perfect circle of the strange metal, inlaid into the floor. The transit aperture, Dr. Thorne breathed, approaching it with academic reverence. Elara felt the seed key pulse with increasing urgency. Through their connection, she sensed multiple threats converging. The corporate team had found the entrance to the deeper passages, and something else was happening on the planet's surface. The containment field around the enemy was fluctuating more severely as the defense systems drained its power. We need to hurry, she said, stepping onto the platform. The key floated from her grasp to hover above the central circle, scanning the ancient controls. One by one, the stations around the platform began to glow with soft blue light. Symbols appeared, similar to those they had seen earlier. It's asking for destination coordinates, Elara translated, nodding to Dr. Thorne. Dr. Thorne stepped forward, offering her data crystal. The seed key scanned it, then projected a stellar map showing the route from their current location to a distant star system. Calculating transit parameters, Elara continued, relaying the key's communications. Warning, transit system has been dormant for 23,549 years. Power fluctuations may result in transit signature visibility. Meaning, Kale asked, it's going to make a lot of noise on any decent sensor array, Dr. Thorne translated. Like setting off a flare in deep space. Unavoidable, Elara/seed key stated. Transit initiating in 30 seconds. Transit field will encompass 5-meter radius from center point. They quickly position themselves in the center of the platform. The key began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, creating a vortex of light and energy around them. The chamber's ambient lighting pulsed in rhythm with the key's rotation. In the distance, they could hear shouts and the sound of energy weapons discharging. The corporate team had reached the outer chambers. 10 seconds to transit, Elara announced, her voice overlaid with the key's harmonic tones. The chamber door burst open, and armed figures in corporate security uniforms rushed in, weapons raised. Halt! By authority of Galactic Heritage Corporation, surrender the artifact immediately. 5 seconds. Fire! The lead security officer ordered. Energy bolts streaked toward the platform, only to be absorbed by the growing transit field surrounding them. 3, 2, 1. The world around them stretched and compressed simultaneously, a sensation that felt like being pulled through the eye of a needle while expanding to the size of a planet. For a timeless moment, Elara felt connected to the vast network the key had shown them. Countless points of light scattered across the galaxy, some bright and active, others dim and dormant, but all part of a grand design she was only beginning to comprehend. Then reality snapped back into focus, and they found themselves standing on an identical platform in a different chamber. This one partially exposed to open air, with a violet sky visible through a collapsed section of ceiling. Verdant plant life had reclaimed much of the structure, vines and roots breaking through the once impervious materials. They had escaped X7, but Elara knew this was just the beginning. The seed key, now floating serenely before her, had bonded with her in ways she didn't yet understand. The genetic heritage of the custodians, whoever they had been, flowed in her veins, connecting her to the architect's legacy for better or worse. Behind them, the transit aperture powered down, but not before broadcasting their arrival across interstellar distances. They were fugitives now, pursued not just by the corporation, but potentially by others who sought the power of the architect for their own ends. So, Kale said, breaking the momentary silence as they all adjusted to their new surroundings. I'm guessing this is where the Real adventure begins. Elara looked down at her hand, where a small symbol had appeared on her palm, matching one of the patterns on the seed key's surface. The mark of a custodian, accepting her role in whatever was to come. Yes, she replied. I think it is. Meanwhile, back on Planet X7, the corporate retrieval team secured the transit chamber, their commander reporting their failure to headquarters. Target has escaped with the architect artifact via some kind of teleportation technology, requesting galaxy-wide alert and maximum bounty authorization for Elara Vance and the stolen architect artifact. In the depths beneath them, unnoticed by the corporate forces, the ancient containment field fluctuated dangerously. With each passing hour, as the planet's defense systems continued to drain power from the shared energy sources, microscopic breaches formed in the prison that had held the enemy for millennia. A single tendril of darkness, no thicker than a hair, pushed through one such breach, tasting freedom for the first time in thousands of years. The true threat was just beginning to awaken, and across the galaxy, dormant seed keys pulsed in response to the disturbance. Elara and her unlikely companions stood on the ancient platform, taking in their new surroundings. The transit chamber on this world was partially reclaimed by nature, sunlight streaming through gaps in the ceiling where roots and vines had broken through the once impenetrable material. The air smelled sweet and slightly spicy, filled with the scent of unfamiliar flowering plants. Where exactly are we? Kale asked, already checking the chamber's exits with the caution of a man accustomed to hostile environments. Dr. Thorne consulted a small handheld device. If my calculations are correct, we're on Vale 9, an uncolonized planet in the Vale Nebula cluster. I discovered architect ruins here 3 years ago, but the academic community dismissed my findings as natural formations. She looked around with vindicated satisfaction. Not so natural after all. Fascinating as this xenoarchaeological validation must be, Zorp chittered anxiously. I feel compelled to point out that we have now officially become fugitives from a major interstellar corporation with resources in multiple systems. Not to mention whatever other parties might be interested in architect technology, Kale added. That transit signature probably lit up sensor arrays across half the sector. Alara nodded, feeling the weight of their situation. The seed key hovered near her shoulder, its glow pulsating gently as it appeared to scan their surroundings. Through their developing connection, she sensed it was performing some kind of system check on the local architect infrastructure. We need a plan, she said firmly, and we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. She turned to Dr. Thorne. You've studied the architects longer than any of us. What do we know for certain about them? Dr. Thorne's eyes lit up with academic enthusiasm. The architects are believed to have been one of the first spacefaring civilizations in our galaxy, active approximately 40,000 to 50,000 years ago. They didn't colonize in the traditional sense. Instead, they established networks of automated facilities across thousands of worlds. Most xenoarchaeologists believe they were custodians of some kind, monitoring and guiding planetary development. And then they disappeared, Kale interjected. Yes, Dr. Thorne confirmed. Rather abruptly, from what we can tell. Most mainstream theories suggest they either transcended physical form or died out from some catastrophe. My own research suggests. She hesitated, then continued with renewed confidence. My research suggests they were fighting something. A war across multiple fronts that eventually forced them to implement some kind of contingency plan rather than continue direct intervention. The enemy, Alara said quietly, remembering the ominous shadow the seed key had shown them, and the containment protocols. The seed key pulsed in confirmation, projecting information directly into Alara's mind. She winced slightly at the sudden influx of data. The key says you're right, she relayed. The architects encountered something during their exploration, something that corrupted both technology and living organisms. They fought it across hundreds of worlds, but it was adaptable, learning with each encounter. Let me guess, Kale said grimly. They couldn't defeat it completely. Alara nodded. They managed to isolate fragments of it on different worlds, establishing containment fields powered by the same energy network that ran their other systems. But they knew the containment wouldn't hold forever, especially if their technology was tampered with or misused. So they created the custodians, Dr. Thorne concluded. Genetically modified individuals from various species who could interface with their technology if the need arose. And apparently, I'm descended from one, Alara said, looking down at the symbol that had appeared on her palm. Though the connection seems to have been dormant for generations until the seed key activated it. Zorp, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. This information, while historically significant, does not address our immediate tactical situation. We have limited supplies, no transport, and are likely being pursued. We need to establish secure positions and communications protocols. Kale laughed. For once, I agree with the bug. History lessons won't help if we're captured or killed before we can use the information. Dr. Thorne seemed ready to argue, but then nodded reluctantly. There's an architect structure about 2 kilometers northeast of here that I used as a base camp during my previous expedition. It's defensible and partially powered, though I never determined the source of the energy. Probably connected to whatever powers this transit platform, Alara suggested, glancing at the seed key. Can you lead us there? Dr. Thorne nodded. Of course. As they prepared to leave the transit chamber, Alara approached the key floating nearby. We need to be less conspicuous, she told it. Can you, I don't know, power down or hide somehow? The sphere pulsed once, then smoothly transformed, its surface flowing like quicksilver until it had reshaped itself into a bracelet around her wrist, the patterns now appearing as decorative engravings. The mental connection remained, but the obvious glow had dimmed to near invisibility. Adaptive camouflage, Dr. Thorne noted with appreciation. Remarkable technology. They exited the chamber into a lush, forested landscape. Massive trees with iridescent leaves towered overhead, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that filtered the violet-tinged sunlight. Bird-like creatures with 6 wings darted among the branches, their calls musical and complex. Dr. Thorne led them along what had once been a paved path, now mostly reclaimed by vegetation. Occasionally, they passed fragments of architect structures, a fallen column here, a partially buried wall there, all made from the same strange, smooth material they had seen in the underground passages of X7. As they walked, Alara felt the seed key feeding her information about their surroundings, the composition of the air, breathable but higher in oxygen than Earth standard, the approximate age of the ruins, 47,239 local years, and occasionally cryptic references to terraforming protocols and biome stability maintenance. This planet was a garden world, she said aloud, translating the impressions she was receiving. The architects used it to develop and preserve vegetation from hundreds of different worlds, some kind of botanical archive or genetic repository. That explains the biodiversity, Dr. Thorne said, clearly filing away this confirmation of another of her theories. I documented over 200 plant species that don't appear in any known database during my previous expedition. They had been walking for nearly an hour when Kale, who had taken point, suddenly held up a hand in warning. They froze, and he motioned them to take cover behind a large fallen tree trunk. "Movement ahead," he whispered, drawing his energy pistol. "Humanoid, at least 3 figures. Corporate forces couldn't have followed us that quickly," Zor protested. "Unless they were already here," Dr. Thorne suggested. "If someone else discovered architect technology on this planet, it might explain why my findings were so aggressively dismissed by the academic community." Kale peered cautiously over the log. "They're not wearing corporate uniforms. Looks more like religious garb, robes, and some kind of ceremonial headgear." Alara felt the seed key pulse with recognition. In her mind, she saw images of similar robed figures on different worlds, always seeking architect sites, collecting fragments of technology. "The disciples of the ascended path," she whispered, translating the key's knowledge. "A sect that believes the architects didn't disappear but transcended physical form. They worship them as gods and seek their technology as holy relics." "Are they dangerous?" Kale asked practically. "The key doesn't seem to consider them an immediate threat, but they're fanatical. If they detect the seed key, they'll stop at nothing to acquire it." "Can we go around them?" Zorp suggested. Dr. Thorne studied the terrain. "It would add hours to our journey and take us through some dense undergrowth. The structure I used as a base is just beyond where they're gathered." Kale checked his energy pistol's charge. "I could create a diversion. Draw them away while you 3 continue to the structure." "No," Alara said firmly. "We stay together." She closed her eyes, concentrating on her connection to the seed key. There might be another way. Through the key, she accessed what appeared to be a map of the area. Not a conventional map, but a 3-dimensional representation of energy flows and underground passages. One such passage ran beneath their current position, connecting to a point near their destination. "There's a maintenance tunnel," she said, opening her eyes, "used by the architects to monitor the underground irrigation systems for their botanical experiments. The entrance should be—" She scanned the area, then pointed to a cluster of large, spiral-shaped plants. "There." They moved cautiously to the spot she had indicated. At first, there seemed to be nothing but dense vegetation, but as Alara approached, the seed key at her wrist pulsed. A section of ground that appeared solid shimmered slightly, revealing a concealed hatch made of the same material as the other architect constructions. "Perception filter," Dr. Thorne murmured appreciatively. "No wonder I never found these during my expedition." The hatch opened silently at Alara's touch, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. One by one, they climbed down, Kale taking rear guard to ensure they weren't followed. The hatch closed automatically behind them, and soft blue lighting activated along the tunnel walls, responding to the seed key's presence. The tunnel was narrow but tall enough for them to stand upright, its walls lined with transparent conduits through which various colored fluids flowed. The irrigation and nutrient delivery systems for the planet's carefully engineered ecosystem. Despite its age, everything appeared to be functioning perfectly. The architects built to last, Dr. Thorne observed, examining the conduits with professional interest. These systems have been operating autonomously for millennia. All part of the network, Alara explained, receiving impressions from the key. Everything interconnected, self-repairing, adaptive to changing conditions. The seed keys act as nodes, monitoring and adjusting as needed. They followed the tunnel for nearly a kilometer, occasionally passing maintenance stations or junctions where other passages branched off. Alara led them unerringly, guided by the key's knowledge of the system. Finally, they reached another ladder leading upward. This should bring us out just behind the structure I used as a base, Dr. Thorne confirmed, consulting her handheld device. The disciples should be well behind us now. They emerged from the tunnel into a small clearing dominated by a pyramidal structure approximately 3 stories tall. Unlike the transit chamber, this building seemed largely intact, its surface unmarred by the centuries. As they approached, panels along its sides lit up with the same blue glow they had seen in the tunnel. The structure recognizes the seed key, Alara explained. It's waking up. A doorway materialized in what had appeared to be a solid wall, sliding open silently to admit them. Inside, they found a series of chambers that Dr. Thorne had clearly adapted for habitation during her previous expedition. Remnants of camping equipment, research tools, and supply containers were arranged around what appeared to be a central control room. "Welcome to my disgraced academic exile," Dr. Thorne said with a hint of bitterness. 3 months of meticulous documentation that the Xenoarchaeological Society dismissed as insufficient evidence of intelligent design. "Their loss is our gain," Kale said practically, already checking the structure's perimeter. "This place is defensible, and it seems to have power. We can regroup here, figure out our next move." Zorp had moved to what appeared to be a communication console. "This technology seems partially compatible with standard interfaces," he noted with surprise. "Dr. Thorne, have you attempted to access external networks from here?" The scientist shook her head. "I tried, but without proper access codes, I couldn't establish a connection. The system would power up but then request authentication I couldn't provide." All eyes turned to Alara. She approached the console hesitantly, the seed key pulsing at her wrist. As she placed her palm on the smooth surface, the symbol on her skin glowed briefly, and the entire console illuminated. "Access granted. Custodian protocol activated," a melodic voice announced, speaking an ancient language that somehow translated perfectly in their minds. "Communication network status fragmented. 3,722 nodes active across 2,109 stellar systems. Nearest active node, system designate Helios, 12, distance 4.7 light-years. It's connecting to the Architect network," Alara breathed. "Not just the local systems, but across the galaxy." The console projected a holographic display similar to the one they had seen on X7, showing a map of nearby star systems. One pulsed with the same rhythm as the seed key. "Another seed key," Dr. Thorne concluded. "Active and relatively close. Can we communicate with it?" Alara asked the console. "Direct communication unavailable," the voice responded. "Network fragmentation requires physical interface. Transit system operational to Helios, 12. Another teleport jump," Kale translated, "to wherever this other key is located." Zorp clicked his mandibles anxiously. "I feel compelled to point out that our pursuers will likely trace our previous transit signature. Remaining here presents significant risk." "He's right," Alara agreed. "We need to keep moving. If we can find more active seed keys, maybe we can piece together what's happening across the network, understand what we're facing, and perhaps discover why you, specifically, were chosen as a custodian," Dr. Thorne added thoughtfully. "The genetic marker must have been dormant in your family line for generations. Something about this moment in time seems significant." The seed key at Alara's wrist pulsed urgently, and new information flowed into her mind. Warning signals from multiple containment sites, fluctuations in the energy network, signs that whatever had been imprisoned was beginning to wake up across multiple worlds. "It's not just X7," she said grimly. "The enemy is stirring in other containment sites. The awakening of this seed key has created a ripple effect through the network. We don't have much time." "Time for what?" Kale asked, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "To reactivate enough of the network to reinforce the containment fields," Ilera explained, "or to find whatever failsafe the architects left in place for this exact scenario." Dr. Thorne was already gathering her most essential research equipment. "We should take only what we need. If the disciples are searching this area, they'll find this structure eventually, especially now that it's fully powered." "Agreed," Kale said. "Basic supplies, weapons, and any data storage you need, Doctor. We'll make for the transit platform and jump to this Helios place." They worked quickly, gathering supplies and preparing for another transit jump. As they were about to leave, Ilera felt a strange sensation through her connection with the seed key, a distant echo, like a call from across vast distances. "Wait," she said, placing her hand on the console again. "There's something else." Another signal. The holographic display shifted, focusing on a different sector of space. A dim, flickering light appeared, distinct from the steady pulse of the active seed key they had identified. "What is that?" Dr. Thorne asked, fascinated. "Emergency protocol activated," the console's voice announced. "Custodian presence detected at coordinates. System designate Erebus, Containment Facility Alpha. Distress signal active." "Another custodian?" Ilera asked, surprised. "I thought I was the only one." "Genetic marker distribution. Approximately 1 in 4.7 billion sentient beings across known space," the voice replied. "Estimated custodian potential. 327 individuals currently active. So there are others like me," Ilera murmured. "And one of them is in trouble." The console displayed additional information about the Erebus system, a remote, uninhabited region with a red giant star designated as a high-security containment facility. The distress signal had been active for 17 days. "Erebus is much further away," Dr. Thorne noted, examining the stellar coordinates. "Nearly 20 light-years from here." "Can we reach it?" Ilera asked the console. "Transit to Erebus requires sequence of jumps. Network instability prevents direct transit. Recommended route: Helios, 12, followed by Nexus Point Gamma, 7, then Erebus." Kale frowned. "A multi-jump journey through potentially hostile territory to reach an unknown custodian sending a distress signal from a high-security containment facility. What could possibly go wrong?" "We have two options," Ilera said, ignoring his sarcasm. "Follow the active seed key signal to Helios, 12, which is closer and might help us understand more about the network. Or attempt to reach this other custodian who might have information we need and is clearly in trouble. The logical approach would be to build our knowledge base before attempting a rescue operation," Zorp suggested. "Helios, 12 presents the most efficient first step. But if another custodian is in danger, they might not have time to wait," Dr. Thorne countered. "And they could have crucial information about the containment facilities." Ilera felt the weight of the decision. Just days ago, she had been a junior archaeologist cataloging pottery fragments. Now she was making choices that could affect the future of countless worlds. The seed key pulsed at her wrist, sharing impressions rather than concrete information, a sense of time running out, of balances shifting, of ancient safeguards beginning to fail. "We go to Helios, 12 first," she decided firmly. "Build our understanding, gather resources if possible, then make for Erebus. A rescue attempt will be more effective if we know what we're doing." No one argued. They had, without formal acknowledgement, accepted Ilera as their leader in this strange journey. The custodian's mark on her palm seemed to glow briefly, as if confirming her authority. They left the structure, using the underground passage again to avoid the disciples, and made their way back to the transit platform. The journey was uneventful, though Ilera sensed increased activity in the planetary systems around them, as if the entire world was waking up after a long sleep, automated protocols activating in response to the seed keys. Presence. At the transit platform, they positioned themselves in the center, as before. Alara held out her wrist, and the seed key transformed back into its spherical form, floating to the same position above the central circle. Transit coordinates set. Helios, 12. The key announced through its connection to Alara. Warning. Destination status uncertain. Last network update. 1,247 standard years ago. Local conditions unknown. Wonderful, Kale muttered, checking his weapon one last time. Another blind jump. Transit in 10 seconds. The key continued, beginning to spin as it had before. 9, 8. Dr. Thorne clutched her equipment bag tightly, excitement outweighing her apprehension. Zorp stood rigidly, his exoskeleton vibrating slightly with tension. Kale maintained a combat-ready stance, eyes scanning the chamber for potential threats until the last moment. 3, 2, 1. The now familiar sensation of stretching and compression enveloped them, and for a moment, Alara again felt connected to the vast architect network. This time, she sensed something else, a darkness moving through the connections, following the energy pathways like a predator tracking prey. The enemy was awakening, and it was aware of the reactivating network. Then they were standing on another platform, in another chamber, on another world. But unlike the lush, preserved environment of Vale 9, the room around them showed signs of damage and decay. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed, and the few remaining lights flickered weakly. And they were not alone. Standing at the chamber's entrance, weapons trained on the platform, were a dozen armed figures in matching gray uniforms. At the center stood a tall, severe-looking woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform adorned with additional insignia marking her as the commander. Alara Vance, she said coldly. By authority of the Galactic Heritage Special Recovery Division, you and your companions are under arrest for theft of corporate property, unauthorized use of restricted technology, and interference with a classified corporate operation. She smiled thinly. Welcome to Helios, 12. We've been expecting you.